I think like everybody, I hate bullies, and Zillow is just a bully. They're an $18 billion real estate company that's been set out from the beginning to disintermediate or destroy the residential real estate market. Now, the past I've covered, there are 7 various lawsuits that I'm aware of, being sued by everybody from state and federal state and federal governments, competitors, customers. Today, I want to take just one of the lawsuits because the more I dig into them, the worse they are, the more despicable I think as a company they are. And while they have great branding, and that's their advantage, I don't think they're worthy of it. I think we need to learn more about what their practices are, get in a little detail. So in Taylor versus Zillow, they're accused of using their Zillow advertising system to basically pay undisclosed and illegal kickbacks to real estate agents. The way it works is you buy leads from Zillow, and then they track how many of those leads go to their Zillow Home Loan department. And if you don't give them enough, they either give you less leads or they charge you more for the leads. Well, that's just a kickback, a financial arrangement. Now, the relationship between the real estate agent and the mortgage company has been around a long time, but it's very heavily regulated. You're not allowed to give kickbacks for business. Any financial relationship is supposed to be disclosed in writing ahead of time. And real estate agents have a responsibility and an incentive to get the best possible loan for their customers. And so what this program does is undermines that, because Zillow is so big, globally, who's going to notice where the leads go and who the loans go? And so they've been sued for this and for violating different laws. Now, interesting, these schemes have been around since as long as I've been in real estate. I started in the mid-'80s. And there was always the in-house mortgage company at a real estate company. They always were subpar people who couldn't get jobs anywhere else, who kind of sold out for the referrals and gave a percentage of the income to the company where they were housed. I made a living competing against them because they were inferior. And one of the truisms in this industry is they never get more than 20% of the market share. It was fascinating when I went to Zillow's own investor survey, and they showed, if you look on the left side here, that they've peaked at about 16%. So they've only been able to strong arm and bribe and have kickbacks to get about 15–60% of the loans that go through their system to their Zillow Home Loans department, so they can double dip on the same customer. Now, part of the way that they get away with this is a lack of accountability. I mean, who's going to call them out on it? The real estate industry news, Zillow is a huge advertiser. They're by far the biggest. So if you're a Market Watch or a AOL.com and your customer is Zillow buying ads, are you going to call them out for being dishonest? Probably not. You're going to cover with serious news. None of them have serious news anymore. Is the Wall Street Journal? Not likely. Well, there's another group of people now. I guess I fall into a category of that as a smaller one, which are internet, influencers, internet news people, internet personalities. And one of the biggest in real estate has become, I think, and one of the best, is Knowledge Brokers Podcast and BAM, hosted by Byron Lazine. And this is a great internet site. They have a great podcast, daily market updates, who theoretically now we have this other group they're going to hold industries accountable, but not really, because number one, BAM sells tickets to their events. They often bring in speakers from the companies they should be holding accountable to. And number two, Byron himself is a practicing agent, which makes him a good commentator, but he's also a customer of Zillow's. He's the co-founder of the One Team, and they describe themselves as an exclusive Zillow growth partner. So on one hand, he's a customer. Is he going to really bite the hand that feeds him, that he's so committed to in his business? I'm not saying he's dishonest. I think he's a great guy. But when I look at his reasoning in defending Zillow's practices recently, it's clear to me he's not paying attention, or something's going on. I don't know what it is. So what I wanted to do today was kind of take his arguments and use those and kind of turn them around on him and show why each of his arguments in favor of Zillow's being able to build the scheme is really the reason why they shouldn't be able to do it. Now, I will say shout out to Google Gemini, the new version. For the first time, you can pop in a YouTube and get to summarize. I asked Google Gemini to create a list because I thought Byron had a nice list of arguments, and I put them together, and I just used Gemini to build them real fast, and it was fantastic. So I just want to shout out to that. So I'll show you what that looks like. I just put in a prompt with the YouTube and said summarize. Actually, I did a summary, and then later asked the question, what were his arguments, and they listed them up. So let's go through one by one. These are arguments by supporter of Zillow, Byron, which I think each proves why Zillow is acting either illegally or unethically. Number one, he says, Zillow has the right to market its own loans because it generates the customer leads, meaning he's saying real estate agents shouldn't be able to complain about Zillow because they're their leads. They're not getting them from realtors. They're creating their own leads. They advertise in the market. Consumers go onto the website, say they want to buy a house, and Zillow should be able to do what they want with it. Well, but obviously Zillow has to follow the same laws everybody else does. Just because you create the lead doesn't mean you're allowed to get a kickback. That's illegal today. It's a RESPA violation. It's also unethical when you send somebody to a service. They expect you're sitting there because they're good. And so the question is the customer being served properly? Is the customer being misled? And is this legal? And the fact that Zillow created the lead, of course real estate agents should feel that Zillow's acting improperly because they are acting improperly regardless of who the lead is. Second, he says that, this is very interesting, that the lawsuit is their way of changing the law. Now, this is a common argument, I think, for people who don't really appreciate capitalism and don't appreciate the importance of a legal system in building business. What he's saying is that the law is bad, and the way Zillow is going to change the law, instead of getting people making their argument and campaigning and winning in an election, they're just going to violate the law, spend millions on an army of attorneys. They'll spend more money on their attorneys than the state and governments will, because they're worth $18 billion, why not? And eventually the government will give up and change the law to accommodate these big companies. And that worked for Amazon. If you look back at the history, Amazon started, the initial jump in their business was they didn't charge local sales tax or state sales tax. They had an advantage of 5 to 10% over local booksellers. Well, in a business where the margins were 3 to 5%, they had a monopoly unfair advantage. And they were being sued by small local governments, state governments around the country, as well as trade organizations. But because Amazon had so much money from Wall Street, they defend themselves. And then finally, once they're worth billions of dollars, said, okay, you're right, we'll follow the law. Interesting enough, they actually created software so they could follow the law and then sold to software companies. But the point was, that's Amazon, which is now a $140 billion company, that could not have existed had they followed state and local laws, had they paid their fair share of taxes. All of us with inferior police and federal and fire protection and schools should hold Amazon accountable. They didn't pay their fair share for years and later got caught. That's what Zillow wants to do. And that's why by violating the law is no reason to make the law accommodate you. It's the opposite. If you violate the law, you should go back and say you're sorry and then politic for the law and change it. But the fact that they violate it is not a reason to make them somehow sympathetic. The third reason Byron says is customers don't care. They prioritize Zillow's service, don't care about the internal industry lawsuits. So what he's saying is because nobody publicizes the illegality and the lack of ethics in Zillow's, since customers don't know about that, all they know is Zillow has a website and they use it. By the way, Zillow's website's not even better than anybody else's. When they first came out with it, it was monumental. They had two things nobody else had. They had the whole country on one database. Well, now multiple websites have the same thing. And second, they had an ingenious Zestimate, their estimate of properties. Well, now multiple companies offer that. And the only reason they're more successful now is they're bigger and bully people, and they spend money in advertising to quiet dissension. And so here we have a case where we say customers don't care. Maybe they would care. Maybe you ask the question to customers, do you mind that your day is being sold to Zillow Home Loans, not because they're better, but just because we make money on that? Would customers care if you ask that question? But nobody's asking that question other than me, I think. Number 4, he says agents are hypocritical because real estate agents only refer customers for the most part to one lending source. Now this is an interesting question. As a real estate agent, I mostly work with listings, so I often work with buyers. But the question is, how do I help my customer best? Many people were trained that you refer your customers to 3 lenders, and that way you can't get sued if anything bad happens. I don't buy that. Now, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn to my broker, but I think my customers pick me because I'm honest, hardworking, and will give them the best advice I can. If there's a lender that will best serve them, it's my duty to introduce them as such. If I have no experience or nobody to recommend, I might give them 3 names and numbers and say, good luck with it. But my job many times is to have the best lender for the job and introduce them to my customer and say, look, you can pick whoever you want. This guy's fantastic. I did that recently last week because we were a very unique property, very short time frame. I needed a professional. We couldn't goof around with somebody to know what they're doing. I don't represent the buyer, I represent the seller. And we had to make a change on the spot. And I recommended to that buyer and their agent a lender that I know is the best. Why would I introduce second best or third best if I think somebody's clearly the best for that case? Now, Byron's saying because realtors only refer one who's their friend or whatever, I don't think that's true. Now, he runs an office, and maybe that's how he runs things. My experience is most real estate agents do only refer to one person because they think that's the best person for their customer. That's the mortgage agent that returns their phone calls. That's the mortgage agent that responds to them. That's the mortgage agent that knows their business best, that they've worked with before. They know how they work. I don't believe most real estate agents just give business to a mortgage person because they're their best friend. In fact, the opposite. I think real estate agents do business with a mortgage person and maybe become friends, but it doesn't work the other way around. But here's the difference. Real estate agents aren't giving that business to one company because they're getting a kickback and hiding the kickback from their customer. What Byron is saying is better to give the loan to one company, you get a kickback, and don't to your customer, than to pick one because they're your best friend. The whole thing is, his whole argument makes no sense. Next, he says Zillow partners are often better because they introduce customers to multiple loans. So it's interesting. He's saying that the Zillow partners will refer customers to Zillow Home Loans and two others, and that makes them better because the average realtor only refers them to the one they think is best. Now think about the math there. If you're giving three, and I ask you to rate of the three, who's the best? Well, by definition, there's a second or third best. And you're recommending your customer second or third best rather than the one that you think is best. Makes no sense to me either. Finally, he says agents won't cut off Zillow from the MLS, meaning agents won't really do anything, so they don't have the right to complain. Well, who's supposed to complain about Zillow violating the law and violating ethics if not real estate agents? The news won't. Byron won't on his podcast. Now, he does interview other people with different arguments. Good for Byron. I do respect him. I think he's a great podcaster. But on this issue, he's completely wrong. Because we as agents have nothing to do but talk to our customers and steer them to the good services and away from the bad ones. I mean, look, I go on Zillow every day and check values of properties I'm comparing. I want to know what customers see as the value of the property. But what I don't do is refer them to Zillow Home Loans because they're not good. In fact, that's the interesting thing about all the research I did for this piece right now. The dog that doesn't bark is nobody says Zillow Home Loans is even average or above average. Byron doesn't say it. Apparently, he must be referring business to them or have customers that come from them. Customers would say, hey, this was great. See, you might think Zillow might make a point of giving the best mortgage service. That's not their goal. Their goal is to make as much money as possible. And so they focus their energy on forcing the relationship, not creating value for the customer with better service. That dog's not barking. That's the real problem. Most real estate agents want to work with a great mortgage person who's going to give them great service and help them get their customers the best rate and the best service. All Zillow seems to care about, if you look at their presentation, if you listen to Byron, is making more money for the same business, which ultimately means a little less service, and the customer should expect that. And personally, I think that's terrible. What do you think about Zillow? Let me know. We're going to look at the rest of the real estate news today in the broader sense. A lot of excitement. One other thing on Zillow before we finish. I just stumbled on this. The more I learn about Zillow, they're just more despicable as a company, the more I hate them. So this is from their investor presentation. And they're saying, well, even though we lost money last year, $112 million, it's really like we made $498 million because of these gimmicks that we use to not pay taxes and pay ourselves. And so a company's worth $18 billion has made virtually no profit its entire time period. You might say, why aren't they helping make society a better place? Well, let's take a look. It says that they paid $5 million in taxes. Now, I don't think they actually wrote a check for $5 million. I think they had so many years of losses, they're counting losses against their current, what they should be paying. I don't believe they actually wrote a check to the federal government. Maybe that's for some state governments, but $5 million in taxes. Okay. Out of their $500 million profit, they pay a 1% tax rate. Maybe not at all with losses. 1% tax rate. Those of us who are in the business, I pay a way higher than 1% tax rate. Even as a corporation, I pay taxes, and then I take the profits from my corporation and pay taxes on that. Zillow's paying 1% of their profits and taxes. But even worse than that, look at how much money they pay. Share-based compensation, $448 million. What tells you is they really made about $1 billion, but took half of that and gave that to their executives and their employees. So look at this. They pay about $5 million in taxes to the states and federal government where they operate. And they can't afford to pay taxes. I'm sure they pay accountants way more than $5 million to not pay any taxes. But they pay $448 million in compensation to the executives and employees of the company. That's Zillow. That company, if every company was like that, we would cease to have a state. We would cease to have a country. No nation can exist with companies operating this way, and yet this one is destroying our real estate industry one disruption at a time, one piece of the puzzle at a time. I've got the courage to speak up against them. You tell me what you think of them. Go ahead and defend them. I'd love to hear your arguments as to why Zillow is a good company. If they're violating the laws, let's hold them accountable to that. Okay, let's take a look at the rest of the market. I'm going to get off of my Zillow bandwagon. Always look at the market. There's there's demand and supply. Demand is determined by interest rates. Here's a quick chart on where interest rates are. Again, we closed about the flat 6.34% for a 30-year fix, about the same. Look what this does to applications. You know, in the political debate, we talk about interest rates, is it important or not. You can see that the number of, as interest rates has gone down, the applications has gone up. And just over time in the last year, as rates came down, the number of purchase applications has risen, about 20%. The interest rate is a reflection of the reduction of wealth from Americans, from most Americans. The only way to offset that is if you have assets. Wealthy people don't care about inflation because they have assets to protect them. The average American doesn't. If you don't buy a house, you don't. And that's why interest rate reduction is so important to the American economy and to the health of our society in the long run. As far as inventory on the supply side, we still have less homes for sale than any other year other than the COVID years. You'll see this graph shows it above these years. These are all COVID years. And this is the lowest pre-COVID year in record, 2019. And inventory is below that significantly. So we still don't have anywhere near enough homes built or for sale in our country. As such, housing prices can't crash. And they can in certain areas, but nationally they can't crash. And we need to generate much more housing to make the opportunity for people to own houses more available. In Los Angeles, our market ticked up a little bit, 34%. So it's gone from a very, very slight seller's market to a slight seller's market where it's been most of the time. Okay, let's take a look at general news. Here's an interesting article I thought. How are people post-fire in Altadena and in the Palisades? Well, not good. 75% of those displaced by the Palisades fires still are in temporary housing. 67% of those displaced by Altadena still in temporary housing. So here we are a year later, and most people are still looking for some solution. I'm sure many of them will end up moving out of the area. A lot of those houses are never going to be rebuilt. And at the pace of our rebuilding, we are not going to see much change in the near future. Just a disaster everywhere around. In Los Angeles, continuing to make our real estate market worse, our LA City Council has approved a 3% rent increase cap for rent-stabilized apartments. What does that mean? Well, it turns out about 45% of Los Angelinos live in rent-controlled apartments. And now the City Council is basically taking over property management, taking property from people, taking the value. The value of an apartment building is the income you get, and the City Council saying, we're going to stop you from getting it, we're going to give it to our constituents, and that way they'll keep us in power forever. And so it was that the cap was 8%, depending on inflation years, and the minimum was 3%. They just changed it to where the cap now is 3%, and the minimum is 0%. And so basically what the City Council is doing is destroying our rental housing stock and taking away the incentive for those older properties to be renovated. And we'll have some new property built, but this is just really a land grab by our City Council. And it's an interesting statistic I saw. This is written by the USC Annenberg, which is a propaganda machine. Like most colleges, universities, they're just captured by the government and the power elite in our city. Take a look at the statistic they put in there, and they just put it in passing. 90% of of renters, they want to say, I'm sorry, I said wrong. 238,000 residents of California, of Los Angeles City, pay 90% of their income in rent. Now think about that. So they're saying that if you have a $2,000 a month rent, you're paying you make $2,200. You have $200 for food and gas, utilities, phone. No, it makes no sense. Or maybe you're in a lower priced area, maybe a one bedroom or studio, you're paying $500 a month. And you only have $50 for food and everything else. No, it makes no sense. And so what we have is we constantly exaggerate the pain of renters. And this is a university, it's supposed to be academic and researched, but it's obviously pure propaganda. There's no way anybody pays 9% of their income for their rent. Maybe 9% of the reported income because they're hiding it. It could be 9% of the income that is reported or that they show, but it's not 9% of income. That's just utter nonsense. USC Annenberg, you're misleading us. In another, one of the main reasons people buy homes is, or used to be, to raise families and have kids in good schools in California. That's not true anymore. Our schools are terrible. How bad are they? Well, we did away with standardized testing at the high school level and middle school level, and now to get into the UC schools, we no longer require SAT scores. But guess what? UC San Diego tells us that 1 in 8 incoming freshmen, this is the number 3 public school in the country, 1 in 8 freshmen perform below middle school math level. They can't even do middle school math, not even high school math. And so increasingly now we have colleges having to teach 7th and 8th grade math to people. That's kind of where our state is today. Okay, what's the city doing to help rebuild in the Palisades? Well, one idea they came up with last week was canceling the mansion tax. Obviously, that's good news for people who have $5 million and $6 million houses. Eliminate the tax so they can afford to sell or build or whatever might be the incentives. But it's interesting, why is it a good idea in the Palisades and not in the rest of the city? Why is the city taking a mansion tax? Remember, that was used to provide money for homelessness, and it turns out, despite them saying homelessness was cured, the money was all wasted. So since we now know we wasted the money, why not remove the tax entirely citywide rather than just in the Palisades or consider it? No comment yet from politicians on that idea. And then as far as the fires and why people might want to live in Palisades or not, here's an interesting study came out. The government is kind of excusing itself, saying that even a full Salinas reservoir would have kept the Palisades hydrants working. Now, I don't know if that's good news or bad news. We know that the fire started, was almost put out, and due to negligence wasn't fully put out, and then reignited and caused the whole crisis. So we know that it was the city fire department's negligence that caused the fires. Now, it wasn't global climate change or whatever. Now, we also know that the city didn't have water in hydrants because this reservoir was empty. And now the city is saying, well, even had been full, it wouldn't have stopped the fire. Well, it might have at some stage. The fire wasn't at full throttle, but was half throttle. Maybe it would have helped. There's no release in the public information about that. But the other question would be, well, what are all these people who work for a city doing whose job is to protect us from fires? Are they saying, well, this reservoir is empty, it doesn't really make a difference. Why even have firefighters? Why even have fire engines? So I just think it shows you the lack of interest in solving the problem. Somebody should have lost their jobs. Many people should have lost their jobs over this. And to say that an empty reservoir would not have solved the problem is missing the point entirely. What do we do to prevent another disaster? What do we do to improve the level of fire services in our city? That's the goal of the report. But unfortunately, nobody's asking those questions. It's just very, very disappointing. Okay, so boy, that's some down information today. I don't know. It's a holiday season coming up. My business has been great this year. I just really want to push our city and our residents to claim accountability to improve things. I'm just tired of us all sitting back and putting up with the bad services at the fire, police, education. We live in a great city with great weather, and we should all, I think, do our best to hold our city government officials accountable and make good decisions in our businesses that help us make our city better. How can I help you? If I can, please reach out at Bill Gross Probate on social media. As always, make today your best day ever. Thanks so much.